My name's Jake, and if I had to sum up my life in one word, it would be average. Average grades, average looks, average everything. In the crowded hallways of high school, I was the kind of guy people barely noticed. I sat at the back of the classroom, my presence barely registering as teachers rambled on. My friends were the same way, nothing special, just a group of people who were fine with blending into the background. But if I'm being honest, I hated it. I hated how invisible I felt. I hated how I never stood out in a room, never did anything that made people take notice. I had dreams of being more, of being the guy who walked through life with confidence, who turned heads instead of blending into the walls. But how could I? The reality was, I was the opposite of all the people I admired. I was the kid who would get nervous just talking to someone outside my small circle, the guy who couldn't even raise his hand in class without feeling like the whole room was watching me. Then there were the cheerleaders. They were everything I wasn't: popular, confident, and always the center of attention. Brianna, the head cheerleader, seemed to glide through life effortlessly. She had this magnetic aura, a smile that lit up the room, and the kind of confidence that made everyone else feel like they were in the background. It was like she had an endless supply of energy, always cheering, always laughing, always surrounded by people who loved her. And me? I was stuck in this cycle of mediocrity, feeling like I was watching everyone else live the life I wished I could have. There was one thing I admired most about her: the way she seemed to believe in herself without question. It was so foreign to me, that self-assurance, that feeling of belonging. I often wondered what it would be like to have that kind of confidence, to feel like you had a purpose in this world beyond just getting through another day. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt impossible. I was trapped in a life where I could barely muster the courage to change anything. And yet, deep inside, I knew I had something more in me. I didn't know what it was, but I had a feeling that it was just waiting for the right push, the right moment before it would come out. But for now, all I could do was dream about being someone else, someone better. It happened on a Friday afternoon, right before the weekend, when the whole school was buzzing with excitement. Brianna, the cheerleader everyone admired, was sitting with her usual group of friends at lunch, laughing as if the world revolved around her. I was sitting at my usual spot, in the farthest corner of the cafeteria, trying not to draw attention to myself. My mind was elsewhere, as it always was, fantasizing about being someone who was seen, someone who wasn't just another face in the crowd. That was when Jake, my best friend, nudged me and pointed toward the cheerleading table with a grin. "Dude, you should try out for the cheer team," he said, his tone half joking, half serious. I laughed nervously.
"Yeah, right.
What am I supposed to do, flip around and cheer like Brianna? Why not?" Jake shrugged. "You're always talking about how much you admire how confident she is, how she owns every room she's in. Why don't you see if you can do the same?" I stared at him, unsure of what to say. It wasn't that I hadn't thought about it before, but I'd never considered acting on it. The idea of standing in front of a crowd, leading cheers, and being the center of attention was terrifying to me. But something about the way Jake said it made me pause. Was I really just going to sit back and continue living my life like this? Invisible, blending in, doing nothing but watching others live the life I wanted? My thoughts were interrupted when Brianna stood up and walked over to our table with that effortless grace of hers, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "Hey, Jake," she said, leaning in slightly. "I heard the cheer tryouts are next week. You should come out and support us. You know, give a little moral support. Maybe even cheer us on." I blinked, surprised by the attention. Brianna was talking to me.
Me.
Of all people. "You should try out," she added, her smile playful but almost teasing. "I think you could be a great addition." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. Was she serious? Was this really happening? Brianna's playful challenge was the spark I needed. For the first time, I felt the urge to do something out of character, to take the risk and see where it would take me. "Maybe I will," I said, before I could even process it. "Maybe I'll try out." And with that simple statement, everything changed. The seed had been planted. The following week felt like a blur. The school's cheerleading tryouts were just days away, and with each passing moment, my nerves grew stronger. What had I been thinking? I couldn't even remember why I'd said yes to Brianna's challenge. Was it just a fleeting impulse? Or was there something deeper inside me that craved this attention, this change? The morning of tryouts, I stood in front of my mirror, staring at my reflection, questioning everything. I had always been the quiet, reserved guy, someone who stayed in the background. How was I supposed to suddenly become someone who jumped around in front of a crowd, smiling, clapping, and rallying people together? What if I looked ridiculous? What if I failed miserably? I pulled on my gym clothes, the fabric unfamiliar on my skin. I had never been one for sports, let alone something as flashy as cheerleading. My mind raced with doubt. What am I even doing? I thought. I don't belong there. They'll laugh at me. Brianna will laugh at me. But then, I remembered what she said. You could be a great addition. Maybe it wasn't so impossible. Maybe I was capable of more than I gave myself credit for. As I walked to school that morning, I felt a strange mixture of excitement and dread. Every step felt heavier, but there was also something else, something urging me forward. I wasn't sure what that something was, but it was enough to keep me moving. By the time I arrived at the gym for tryouts, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. The room was packed with eager, confident girls, already in their cheer uniforms, stretching and chatting as if they belonged there. And then there was me, awkward, nervous, and completely out of place. I could hear snippets of their conversations, laughter that made me feel smaller, more invisible. Are you ready for this? Jake's voice broke through the noise. He had been my best friend for years, but I'd never needed him more than I did right now. He gave me a reassuring smile, his face glowing with excitement as though he was eager for me to dive in. I don't know if I can do this, Jake. I'm not like them. I gestured to the cheerleaders, trying to hide the doubt in my voice. Jake shook his head. You've got this. Look, I know it feels scary, but I've seen you. You're stronger than you think. You've been practicing in your room for weeks, haven't you? You've got what it takes. His words hit me harder than I expected. I had been practicing. At night, when everyone was asleep, I'd sneak into my room and replay old cheerleading routines I'd seen on YouTube. I'd practice moves and chants in front of my mirror, feeling a rush of adrenaline and possibility. Every time I nailed a routine, it was like a small piece of me shifted. The shy, unsure person I had been was starting to fade, and I could see glimpses of someone more confident, someone who didn't hide in the shadows. You're right, I said, my voice gaining strength. I've worked for this. I can do this. And just like that, the fear I had been holding on to began to ease. Jake gave me a quick pat on the back before heading to the bleachers to watch. When it was my turn, I stepped out into the gym, feeling the weight of every eye on me. I wanted to turn and run, but something stopped me. I took a deep breath, pushed aside the panic swirling inside me, and remembered the steps I had practiced. The routine wasn't perfect. There were stumbles and missteps, but I did it. I cheered, I smiled, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was seen. Afterward, Brianna approached me, her face unreadable. My heart skipped a beat. You did better than I expected, she said, her smile softening. I was wondering if you were just going to back out, but you actually got in there. That's brave. My stomach fluttered. She noticed me. Brianna, the girl I'd admired from afar, had noticed me. It felt like an accomplishment, but also a sign. Maybe I wasn't as invisible as I had thought. Later that evening, I sat down at my desk, replaying the day in my mind. I had taken a step. A small one, but it was something. I wasn't the same person I had been the day before. That shy guy who avoided attention was slowly being replaced by someone else, someone who was willing to try, to risk embarrassment, to step outside the comfort zone and see what happened. I looked at the calendar on my wall. The final tryouts were in 3 days. I didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was clear. I wasn't backing out. Whatever happened, I was going to keep going. The seed had been planted. It was time to see just how much I could grow. The days leading up to the final tryouts were both thrilling and terrifying. My mind was a battleground of self-doubt and small bursts of hope. Every time I thought I had conquered one fear, another would spring up in its place. The first real blow came the morning of practice. As I walked into the gym, Brianna and the other cheerleaders were already rehearsing their routines. They moved with such precision, their synchronized steps and high energy moves a stark contrast to my clumsy attempts just a few days ago. I could already feel the tension in my chest as I took my place at the edge of the group. "You're a bit late today," Brianna remarked as she glanced at me, her tone casual but pointed. Her words made my throat tighten. The other girls smirked in response. "They've been doing this for years," I thought, my stomach nodding. "And I'm just here." I took a deep breath and joined the others, trying to match their movements. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get it right. My arms felt stiff, my legs uncoordinated. Every step seemed out of sync, and my mind screamed for me to stop and leave before anyone could see how out of place I truly was. But I couldn't. Brianna didn't let me off easy. "Come on, get it together," she snapped, her frustration obvious. "You can't just show up and expect to be a part of this. If you want to be a cheerleader, you need to commit." Her words stung more than I expected. I had committed, hadn't I? I was here trying my best, but I didn't feel good enough. What was I thinking? I thought, my face burning with embarrassment. I can't do this. I don't belong here. As I stumbled through the routine again, I noticed some of the other girls whispering, their eyes lingering on me. Their gazes weren't friendly. I had become the odd one out, the person everyone was silently judging. "They're all thinking it, aren't they?" I told myself. "I'm a joke." I paused just for a moment, but it felt like an eternity. The thoughts were overwhelming. "You're too weak. You're not strong enough. You'll never fit in here." That's when I felt the familiar weight of fear, the same feeling that had kept me from pursuing anything new for so long. I turned toward the corner of the gym, ready to bolt, but then I remembered something. Jake's words echoed in my mind. "You're stronger than you think." I couldn't run now. I'd come this far, and I wasn't going to let fear make me quit. The next time I faced the group, I focused all my energy on the routine. I kept my eyes on my movements, ignored the whispers, and forced myself to keep going. It was clumsy, it was messy, but it was something. Later, during a break, Brianna approached me. For a moment, I braced myself for another reprimand, but she surprised me. "You know you're not bad," she said, her tone softer. "You've got potential. You just need to trust yourself more." I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her right. "Really?" She smiled, a rare moment of kindness breaking through her usual tough exterior. "Yeah, just take it one step at a time. It'll come." The rest of practice went by in a blur. I wasn't perfect, far from it, but I began to see it differently. Every time I messed up, I wasn't a failure. I was just one step closer to getting it right. There were small victories, too. I nailed a cheerleading chant. I managed to land a jump that had tripped me up earlier. When the practice ended, I was exhausted, but something had shifted. The fear was still there, but it wasn't as overwhelming. There were cracks in the armor of doubt, and for the first time, I began to believe I might actually have a place here. That night, as I practiced the routine in my room, I felt different. My movements weren't perfect, but they felt stronger, more confident. I was pushing myself, and even though I was still scared, I felt the smallest spark of hope flicker inside me. Maybe, just maybe, I could do this. But deep down, I knew that tryouts weren't going to be easy. The real test was yet to come. The night of tryouts finally arrived, and the gym buzzed with the kind of energy that made my heart race in my chest. It wasn't the kind of excitement you feel before a big game or event. It was something deeper, more personal. This wasn't just about becoming a cheerleader for the school. This was about proving to myself that I could push past all the doubts, all the insecurities that had held me back for so long. I stood in front of the mirrors, adjusting the cheerleader uniform for the 100th time. My stomach twisted, but this time it was different. The usual wave of self-consciousness and fear didn't paralyze me. It buzzed inside me like electricity, making me feel more alive, more aware of everything I had become in the past few weeks. My reflection wasn't the same girl who had hesitated at the edge of the gym, unsure of where she belonged. Now, I saw someone who had fought for her place and earned it. I looked around at the other girls, the cheerleaders I had once feared, now a source of inspiration instead of intimidation. Brianna caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough. She sees me, I realized. She sees the effort I've put in. The tryouts began. The music blared, and we jumped into our routines. I felt the rhythm flow through my body, my muscles responding in ways they hadn't before. The moves, once stiff and awkward, came naturally. I wasn't thinking. I was being, moving with confidence I hadn't known I had. It was like all the pieces of me were finally aligning, and I was more than just the girl who had stumbled into cheerleading on a dare. I was someone who was owning this moment. When I nailed the final flip and landed perfectly on my feet, the gym seemed to hold its breath. For a split second, everything went still. Then, the applause came. It was louder than I had expected, a surge of recognition that made my heart swell. I looked up to see Brianna and the others cheering for me, their smiles genuine. Even the ones who had been skeptical at first were nodding in approval. And in that moment it hit me. I wasn't just accepted as a cheerleader, I was respected. I walked off the floor, my breath heavy, my face flushed with pride. Jake, who had been watching from the bleachers, caught my eye. He gave me a thumbs up, and I couldn't help but grin back at him. "You did it," he said as I reached him. There was awe in his voice, and something else, pride. I nodded, feeling the weight of the past few weeks lift off my shoulders. I think I finally believe it. As the results were announced, my name was called, and it felt like the culmination of everything I had worked for. I was part of the team now, not just because I had tried, but because I had transformed, mentally, emotionally, and physically. The cheerleading world had tested me, pushed me beyond what I thought I was capable of. And in doing so, it had revealed who I truly was. I stood there, smiling in the mirror, and I realized that this wasn't just about the uniform, the moves, or even the applause. It was about becoming the version of myself I had always kept hidden, the one who was strong, determined, and unapologetically confident. The night of the first big football game had arrived, and the entire school was buzzing with excitement. The stands were packed with students, their cheers blending with the rhythmic beats of the drumline. The lights of the stadium cast long shadows across the field, and I stood at the edge of the cheerleading squad, my heart pounding in my chest. It was the moment I had been waiting for, but it also terrified me. Tonight wasn't just about cheering for the team. Tonight, I would perform a solo stunt, a move I had never attempted before in front of such a large crowd. The pressure of it weighed on me, and my stomach twisted with anxiety. Every part of me wanted to run and hide, but I couldn't. Not now. Not after everything I had worked for. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself, but my mind kept racing. The crowd seemed overwhelming. The other cheerleaders around me were calm, composed, as if they had done this a million times, but I was still that girl who had walked into tryouts uncertain and afraid. What if I messed up? What if I fell? What if I wasn't good enough? "Hey, you've got this," Brianna's voice broke through my thoughts. I looked up to see her standing beside me, her expression serious but kind. She gave me a small, encouraging smile. "You've worked harder than anyone. You belong here, just like the rest of us." I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. Brianna had always been my biggest supporter, but today I needed to believe in myself. I belong here. I've earned this. The music started, and it was time. The cheerleaders broke into their routine, and I moved into position, standing at the edge of the formation. As I stared out at the field, everything seemed to blur. The noise, the lights, even the other cheerleaders. It was just me, the moment, and the stun ahead. My heart hammered in my chest as my partner grabbed my waist, and I leaped into the air. Time seemed to stretch, and for a moment, I was weightless, suspended between the earth and the sky. As I twisted, I felt my body tense, fighting against the urge to falter. My mind screamed at me to drop, to stop, to be safe. But then, I remembered Brianna's words, "You've worked harder than anyone." I focused, trusting the strength of my legs, the power in my arms, and the unwavering belief that I could do this. I was no longer the girl who doubted her worth, the one who hesitated to step into the spotlight. I was a cheerleader, confident, strong, capable. The ground rushed toward me, and with a final push, I landed perfectly on my feet. The moment I touched down, the stadium erupted into applause. The roar of the crowd overwhelmed me, but it was a good kind of overwhelming. It was the sound of success, of validation, of everything I had worked for. I stood tall, chest heaving, eyes bright with disbelief and triumph. My teammates rushed to surround me, their cheers ringing in my ears. Brianna clapped me on the back, her smile wide with pride. "I knew you had it in you," she said, and this time it wasn't just encouragement, it was acknowledgement. In that instant, I realized something powerful. I hadn't just nailed the stunt. I had faced my deepest fears and crushed them. The girl who was once afraid of being seen, afraid of failure, had transformed into someone unafraid to stand tall and be proud of who she was. I wasn't just part of the squad anymore. I had become the person I had always wanted to be. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely, unapologetically alive. The weeks following the big game felt like a dream. The nervous energy that had once consumed me had been replaced with a quiet confidence. Every practice, every cheer, every routine was no longer something I feared. I embraced it, knowing I had already proven to myself what I was capable of. At school, I noticed the difference in how I carried myself. I no longer slinked through the halls, avoiding eye contact, afraid of judgment. Instead, I walked with my head held high, a smile on my face. People greeted me more warmly, and I realized that the transformation I had gone through wasn't just visible in the gym or on the field. It radiated in every corner of my life. Brianna and I grew even closer. She was no longer just my teammate. She had become my closest friend, the one person who had believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. We spent hours talking about everything, our dreams, our struggles, our future. And with every conversation, I felt more grounded in who I was, more assured of my place in the world. One afternoon, after school, I sat with my parents at the kitchen table, something I hadn't done in a while. They'd always supported me, but there had been a distance between us, a hesitation I couldn't explain. But now, as I looked at them, I realized how much I had changed. "I'm proud of you," my mom said, her eyes soft with emotion. "I've seen how hard you've worked, and I see how much you've grown." My dad, who had always been a man of few words, smiled and nodded. "You're becoming someone I admire, sweetheart." Their words warmed me, but more than that, they made me realize how far I had come. This transformation wasn't just about cheerleading or proving something to anyone. It was about discovering who I truly was and letting that version of me shine. I had stopped hiding, stopped doubting, stopped running away from the things that scared me. And as a result, I was living a life full of purpose, one where I was not afraid to take up space, to be seen, to be myself. I knew that the journey didn't end here. There would still be challenges, still moments of doubt. But now I had the strength to face them. I was no longer defined by my fears. I was defined by my courage, my perseverance, and the person I had become. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Sometimes, the biggest obstacle we face is the one within ourselves. We often doubt our abilities, hide parts of who we are, and let fear dictate our choices. But true transformation begins when we stop running from our insecurities and start embracing them. It's only by stepping out of our comfort zones, facing our fears, and trusting ourselves that we unlock the strength and potential we've always had within us. The journey of self-discovery isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. When we accept ourselves for who we truly are, we create space for growth, confidence, and true happiness. So, take that leap, follow your heart, and remember, you are capable of becoming the person you've always dreamed of being. The power to change your life is already in your hands.